Hello, ladies and gentlemen. With FanFest right around the corner, I thought it might be fun to spend a little bit of time doing some speculation before we get some more details on what exactly we are getting in terms of jobs in 4.0. Now, I know I've had my own personal theories floating around for a very long time now, and I figured it might be fun to talk a little bit about them here. I'm going to preface this with the fact that this is all speculation. Nothing is confirmed. We don't know any of the jobs. We have some, very, very vague possible hints, but I'm going to discuss various jobs that I think could be plausible in the expansion. Maybe if there's any lore reasoning, I'll get into that as well. And I will also say that when I'm discussing Blue Mage, which I'll get to that in a second, there are going to be some minor spoilers to the Final Fantasy XIV storyline. So if you haven't completed the 3.0 series yet, there's some very minor spoilers that don't really tie in too much to what happens, but it kind of spoils one thing that does happen at one point in the storyline. So just so you know, that is going to happen. But without further ado, let's just dive right in. Let's talk about Blue Mage. So Blue Mage is something that people have been talking about and wanting for a while now. Originally, Yoshi said that he didn't think they could make Blue Mage work. But I believe at one point it was mentioned in the 11th floor for the anniversary event last year. An NPC just kind of offhandedly, mentioned Blue Mage as a thing. So, it's definitely possible. Now, however, the big thing here that leads me to think that Blue Mage could definitely work out is there is a lot of lore centric to the possible theme of the 4.0 expansion that would really help flesh out Blue Mage. Now, for those of you that may be unaware, it is very, very likely that the expansion is going to take place in Alamigo. There is a lot of stuff out there that is hinting towards it. The storyline seems to be directing that way. There was some data mined stuff a while back that pretty much all but confirmed it. I'm not going to talk about that or put any of that here, but if you dig enough, you'll find it. Suffice it to say, Alamigo is pretty much a shoo-in. So that being said, let's talk about how Alamigo could tie into Blue Mage and Blue Magic. And the key that ties all of this together is Rauban Alden, the General of the Immortal Flames. Now, for those of you that don't know, in Final Fantasy XI, the leader of the Immortals, which were the Blue Mages, was Rauban. A character named Rauban was the leader of the Immortals, much like Rauban in 14 is the leader of the Immortal Flames. Could just be a tie-in, just a name tie-in, just a cute thing, Rauban and the Immortals, Rauban and the Immortal Flames. But on top of Rauban leading the Immortal Flames and having, the name of a very prominent Blue Mage in Final Fantasy XI, he also wields a sword that is very, very important to Blue Mages in Final Fantasy XI, known as Tizona. Now, Tizona was originally in possession of another person. Rauban actually claimed it after he defeated its original wielder on the Blood Sands in Ul'dah. But the fact is, his name is Rauban, he wields Tizona, and he is known as the Bull of Alamigo. And we've seen in various cutscenes that he tends to kind of go into a bit of a berserker rage. He's got some fury there. And in patch 3.2, when you fight him, he actually has some pretty crazy abilities that honestly sort of border on magic almost. So there is a very real possibility that Rauban could actually be a Blue Mage. For those of you that don't know what Blue Magic is centered around the use of monster abilities, essentially. So they take the use of monstrous, attacks and stuff like that and use it as a part of their arsenal. So Rauban, the Bull of Alamigo, could quite literally mean that in the fact that maybe he uses, the strength of a bull as like his font of power and source of strength and so on and so forth. It's definitely a real possibility. Rauban did wield two swords. He had a pair of swords. Only one was Tizona. I think one was like either its twin or just a matching one. But he did have two swords until he lost his arm and he can't fucking wield two. But he had two swords. What's to say that, Blue Mage won't dual-wield swords? That's what they did in Final Fantasy XI. They dual-wielded scimitars. It could be, a very, very real possibility that Rauban is a Blue Mage. He dual-wields these big, crazy scimitar-looking Tizona. Who knows? This is all speculation, but I think this is speculation that definitely makes sense, could be a real possibility. So Blue Mage, definitely something that could be on the table. Now, the next big one that has also been referenced in-game on the 11th floor, or whatever it was called, is Red Mage. And this is something people have been wanting for a long time as well. In fact, on the art book that came out a while back, it kind of looked like someone was wielding a rapier. And so that's, traditionally sort of a Red Mage weapon. And I think that's, Red Mage would definitely fit as a new job in 4.0. Now, a lot of people say, oh, Red Mage will be a healer, or it could be a tank, but I heavily disagree with that. Red Mage traditionally has always been, a jack of all trades, master of none. They can use red magic, they can use white magic, they can use black magic, and they have some melee capability, right? They use a sword, a rapier, and sometimes a buckler. But I could definitely see Red Mage being a melee support job, sort of like how Machinist and Bard are ranged support. Red Mage could be melee support. They use their rapier for, sort of moderate melee damage. That would fit with the theme of Red Mage not being a heavy damage dealer. They could tie in some black magic in its combos, maybe, so like you have like maybe a couple sword attacks and a fire spell or something like that to sort of fit the aesthetic of a Red Mage using some black magic in their skill set, but nothing too crazy. And then you could have some white magic in the form of maybe a minor support heal, kind of like Paladin has Clemency. They could have abilities like Refresh. Refresh was actually a very important Red Mage spell in Final Fantasy XI, and both Bard and Machinist have Refresh. They could have a damage boosting party buff, sort of like Foe's Requiem and Turret Overcharges, in the form of enhancement spells like, End Fire or An Arrow and Thunder, stuff like that. There's definitely a lot of things they can do there to make Red Mage a melee support, and it would add some variety to that type of class, because at this point we have two ranged support classes. We have Bard and Machinist. So why not add a melee? So people who want to play support but not play ranged would have something to do with it. I think that's the most plausible option for a Red Mage in Final Fantasy XIV, but it remains to be seen if that will be true or not. As far as lore is concerned, we know that fencing was a very big thing in Ishgard, so it could be tied to Ishgard. Who knows? I don't know how they would tie that into Alamigo, but job concept-wise, I think it'd be fantastic to have a melee support. And I think that would fit really, really well alongside, Machinist and Bard. Next up, we have the job that arguably is the one that is most plausible and seems like it's probably going to be a thing, and that is Samurai. We've had lots of hints towards Samurai in various places. It's been talked about a lot. It's one of the the hot topics with the community. Samurai is probably going to be making it into 4.0. Now, would it be a tank or a DPS? That's the real question. That's the big debate right now. Personally, I would prefer it to be a tank, but I'm okay with it being a DPS, either or, whatever works. I don't know how they would make it very unique as a tank outside of Dark Knight, because Dark Knight's supposed to be sort of parry-based, and when you think Samurai, if you think a Samurai tank, it'd be more parry and deflection-based, so I don't know how they would differentiate it from Dark Knight. But it could definitely make a tank. I mean, traditionally, you think Samurai armor, really big, bulky. It would just make sense for Samurai to be a tank. At the same time, it also makes sense for it to be a DPS. So who knows? It could be either or. As far as lore is concerned, it would definitely make sense to see Samurai over in that region, because we can assume Samurai would originate from the Far East over in Othard. And now if people were going to cross from Othard to Eorzea, they would cross the Jade Sea, and they would land most likely on Eorzea's eastern shore, which is Girabanya and Alamigo. So, it all kind of ties in. Maybe there's Samurai on the coast. Maybe they just came over, and we bump into them or whatever. So they could definitely fit in Samurai to the idea of an Alamigan themed expansion. Next up, we have a job that a lot of people want, one that was very popular in Final Fantasy XI, and in my opinion would make for a fantastic healer, and that is Dancer. Now, there are some very real tie-ins to Dancer in Final Fantasy XIV that a lot of people might not be aware of. Back in 1.0, there was a leave quest that had you craft several pair of keks, you know, the pants, the keks. And we found out, lore-wise, keks were traditionally worn by Alamegan blade dancers. Also in 1.0, there was a point where you would fight against an Alamegan blade dancer, and even now there's a pair of jackboots called the Blade Dancers jackboots. There's been plenty of reference to these Alamegan blade dancers. Who's to say that this isn't an actual job? Who's to say it doesn't become dancer? You know, we could have this war dancer of sort, this blade dancer. In Final Fantasy XI, dancer dual-wielded daggers, so you could have, you know, another job that dual-wields daggers, kind of like ninja. They could even mix it up, maybe have a, you know, dagger in one hand or in some sort of offhand. I don't know. They could definitely do things with that. Suffice it to say, you have these Alamegan blade dancers, and who's to say that maybe it doesn't fit sort of a support role? In Final Fantasy XI, dancer could be a main healer. They had very potent heals, support abilities, so on and so forth. It could be the same thing in Final Fantasy XIV, where this blade dancer sort of like, you know, raises morale and has like really powerful healing spells and is sort of like a melee healer. Because we have several ranged healers, but we don't have anything that's like in the thick of it, right? So with the idea of maybe mixing things up with the expansion, they could go with a melee healer as well, one that's kind of in the thick of it, doing melee attacks instead of casting spells, and, you know, using their war dances and stuff like that for healing. So it could be a very real possibility to have Dancer as this sort of crazy melee healer buffer. The lore is there for them to work with at the very least, so this could also fit in, you know, with the idea of an Alamegan expansion. Now, last up is one of my personal favorite jobs from Final Fantasy, and one that I really hope we see make it into Final Fantasy XIV. I'm doubtful that it will be a thing for this expansion, but I have my hopes, and that would be Beastmaster. I think Beastmaster would be fantastic in Final Fantasy XIV, because what they could do with it, picture this, we don't have a one-handed axe wielder yet. So what if we had Beastmaster wield a one-handed axe and a shield? We could have Beastmaster become a new tank. And the cool thing you could do here is we already have a pet-based healer, we have a pet-based DPS. What if we had a pet-based tank? Now, you could have this Beastmaster where you would tank as the Beastmaster, like you would be the one primarily tanking, but you would have a pet with you, you know, a random beast that you can maybe choose, maybe a few different skins, maybe they do a few different things, kind of like, you know, Garuda and Ifrit and Titan all have different things they do. Maybe you have 3 different pets you could choose from that each do a little bit of a different thing or have like a different ability or utility. And then you could have this pet that fights alongside you. You could have defensive cooldowns tied to it, like maybe it takes hits for you for a little bit, or like it gives you some of its HP, or, you know, there's a lot of things they could do with the idea of having a pet incorporated as a defensive type of cooldown companion sort of thing. I think it'd be really, really cool to have that. A lot of people don't like pet jobs and the way they worked out in Final Fantasy XIV, but if, you know, there were some minor adjustments and they kind of worked on it and they made a Beastmaster tank, I think it could be a really, really cool addition to Final Fantasy XIV and really mix up the tanking scene. I would absolutely love that, because I like to main tank. You know, my main jobs are tanks. I play Warrior, Paladin, and Dark Knight primarily. So a Beastmaster tank on top of that would be phenomenal. And I love the idea of a one-handed axe and shield. But again, I don't think this will probably happen in 4.0. I would love to see it, but there's just too many other things that would make more sense than a Beastmaster at this point in time. But I think that will about cover all the job speculation I have for 4.0 at this point. FanFest is, as of right now, pretty much exactly 1 month away. And we're hopefully going to get some new information on at least one job, maybe 2 at FanFest. So I'm really looking forward to that. We'll finally be able to put all the speculation to rest and have some concrete details. But in the meantime, it's just really fun to speculate. I love talking about it. I love theorizing, and I would love to hear what you guys think the jobs might be, you know, what you would like to see, all that good stuff. Feel free to drop it in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.